Security continues to be a major concern for Nigeria even as she turns 65 tomorrow. What exactly will be the solutions that we're proffering? Well, one of them we've proffered over the years has been state policing. There have been conversations back and forth on whether or not we will eventually subscribe to state policing. The current Nigeria police has spoken against it. They do not want state policing. But it does appear that the president is throwing his weight behind it, as well as a number of other state governors. What needs to be the safeguards in place if Nigeria is going to succeed with having state police? We're joined this morning by Dr. Charles Omole, who is a lawyer and a security policy expert. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Good morning.
We've spoken several times on this issue of state police, and as my colleague did highlight, security is one of the things that we want. The death of our colleague at a sister station, immediately brings issues like this to the fore because she lost her life in an armed robbery incident. This should be something that ordinarily the state, if we had a policing system that was effective, should have been nipped, so to speak. But unfortunately, this happened. So what exactly do you think needs to happen for us to have a policing system that is fast, responsive, and timely in such a way that Nigerians feel safe in their homes?
Thank you. First of all, my condolences to the family and friends of your colleague from the other station. The focus, before I actually go on the issue of state policing, because at a fundamental level, who controls Nigerian police is neither here nor there so long as people are safe. The challenge is the fact that what we've had in Nigeria is what I call police-led intelligence, rather intelligence-led policing. That means that, it's something I've, repeatedly said here many times. We don't have effective intelligence activities within not just the police, our security agencies, and they don't work together. But on the issue of state policing, which is actually the key here, the challenge is if you don't learn from history, you will repeat history. Like I've said before, many people know we had not just 2 but 3 layers of policing in Nigeria up until 1966, when most people were complaining about literally the local and native police. They were corrupt. The emirs in the north, the obas, and the politicians in the west were misusing them. So Ironsi put the panel together and said, okay, what do? They recommended that, they should be merged. So now we are saying, because we're having a problem with the new central structure, we should just simply go back to what we had that we said didn't work. So that's my challenge with the way people say, let's just go to state policing. Now, I feel the solution is more in between. By that I mean the current status quo is definitely not sustainable. And full-blown state policing can be problematic. So what I'm suggesting we need to do is what I call state-focused policing rather than state policing. What that means is, the challenge many governors are saying is they do not have operational control of the police in their states. Even though Section 215 of the Constitution did say that the Commissioner of Police in every state must obey every lawful order of the governor. But the challenge is that immediately after that section, the Constitution now says, in relation to the order of the governor, the Commissioner of Police may, M-A-Y, may consult upwards, the President, IG, and OCA, and all that. But operationally in Nigeria, that word may has been changed to shall, to the point where some commissioner cannot drink water without consulting Abuja first. That is what makes the governors feel that they can't control policing in their state. So for state-focused policing to work, what that means is that each state needs to produce what I call a state policing plan. That state policing plan will be 5 years in nature, which will be more than the tenure of one governor. The only idea is to say, this is what my priorities are in my state. That state policing plan will be sent to the Inspector General of Police, who will go through it and agree with the governors. And then that will go to the National Policing Council, who will now approve that state policing plan. Now, this is where who will now approve that state policing plan. Now, this is where the kicker is. Once that is approved, any instruction given to the Commissioner of Police by the governor that is within the parameter of this, that approved state policing plan must be obeyed without any recourse to Abuja. So that gives state effectively operational control, governors of their state commands, but within the purview of the approved policing plan. You know, so that will solve a lot of the problem in terms of the speed at which the commissioners of police will obey the governor, and then you just have to be giving the IG maybe monthly status update. The advantage of this approach is we don't need to change any single law. It can be put in place within 6 months. You know, both the Constitution and the Police Act backs up this sort of arrangement. For example, in Section 9 of the Police Act, that Section 9 deals with the duties of the Inspector General of Police. The very first duty, number one, in that Police Act states that the Inspector General of Police must produce a national policing plan at the end of every financial year. The truth is that no IG has ever done that. So you can't have a national policing plan without having a state policing plan. So this state policing plan will not allow the national policing plan to be created that will now govern how things are done.
Do you think that it will be restrictive in the sense that if new threats emerge within the course of a year, and a governor says, well, we did not envisage this, but this has now come up and we'll need you to attack this, how do you think that that will be handled within the plan which you propose?
The template for the state policing plan has provisions for that. The whole idea at the moment is, for example, a state might consider armed robbery their number one problem. Another state might think it's banditry. Right now, things being done centrally doesn't work. So the governor can say, armed robbery that's number one in state A may not be on the list of state B at all in terms of policing priorities. So clearly, there will be provisions for emergencies in that sense. You know, and also you have to remember that the Inspector General of Police will have what I call national, for example, we have the IG have its own units, for example, that can be deployed to any state to deal with emergencies. So that will be captured. But the whole idea here is the state governors will have operational command of the police within that. Now, the beauty of this arrangement is this. It doesn't mean if you want full state policing, you can't have it. You know, in the 1966, when Ironsi decided to merge all the police, even though it was a military dictatorship we had at that time, it took them 2 years to merge it. If it was been done under a civilian administration, that could have taken 8 years. So even if the constitutional amendment goes through right now, we are not having state policing until way after Asiwaju's second term, if he wins. It's not something that can just happen overnight. Well, so how do we keep our people secure while that is in the works?
Some people will say perhaps that might not be necessarily true, given the fact that we have seen some attempt at regional policing. We saw the obstacles against things like Amotekun. We saw the Southeast, I think, have since shelved that now. But they too also had their own Ibubeagu, I think, they came up with at the time. But that did not quite materialize. Maybe it did, and we're not quite hearing as much. But Amotekun is still very much in the works. We saw state governors come out to say, well, regional policing might not be approved. They came up with some clause within their states. The assemblies approved it, and then they have formed something which seems to be working. There are complaints here and there, but it does appear that they have a prototype of what it could look like. So given what we have now, what has now been put in place by those governors, what lessons do you think we could learn from establishments like that, those ones operating at the subnational level?
You see, when you talk about state policing, we have to look at it. I think many governors do not understand that there are what I call collateral effect of having state police. For example, in merging the policing levels in 1966, centralizing it, one of the things that also happened was they merged the prison service, to central, now correctional service. So if you are going back to state policing, you're going to have state prisons, for example. So governors have to build new prisons to house, because you can't prosecute by state police for a state crime and put them in federal prison. It's not going to work. So there's so many things. When I say this needs to be worked out, it's not just about changing the constitution. Then what happened to people, organizations like civil defense? Do we have state civil defense? What's their fate? in a state policing environment. So these are things, when I'm saying it's going to take way beyond Ajay's second term if he wins, that's what I mean. There are practicalities that will need to be worked out for any state policing to be entrenched. But in the meantime, how do we secure the nation? That's where this state-focused policing can either be a stopgap measure, or it might work so well, it might say, actually, we don't need state policing again. You know, because at the end of the day, like I said, who controls the police is neither here nor there. Are they doing what they're supposed to do? That's the key.
Yeah, but you haven't also quite answered the question of what the lessons that we can learn. So for a number of other states, I mean, those who are not in the Southwest and are part of Amatekon, they have also put in a vigilante process in place because they realize that they need something at the grassroots. They need people at the grassroots. Even at some point, the military in tackling terrorism in the Northeast realized that it needed people who understood, and this is the argument that a lot of people make for state policing, that they need people who are in the community, who grew up in those communities, who understand the culture, the terrain, and everything about the community to be able to, you know, really deal with the misfits of those who are causing insecurity within that particular area. And so the military, I think they had civilian JTF to help them, and they were able to record some progress as a result. So what do you think we can learn from the existence? Because these outfits are already existing pari passu with the state-recognized institutions that we already have. What do you think needs to happen for us to be able to maximize the lessons that we're currently learning from these people?
You know, generally, one of the major concerns about what I call state policing is the fact that you have varying standards from state to state. You have crime displacement. So if a state like Lagos is rich, so it can employ as many police as it needs. If a neighboring state is not that rich and they can't put as much money into policing, crime will just be moved from Lagos to that state. So in a way, we are not actually solving the problem. The issue also is, even within the current policing structure, part of the challenge we have is, in Nigerian police, there are only two categories of officers. You have what they call those on special duty and those on general duties. The problem is those two categories, which are the ones that exist, are both subject to the normal police transfer policy. So if we are to have what you're talking about in terms of what we call community policing, we use it, loosely, is the fact that they need to create a third category, which is those community police, which means for the entirety of their stay in the police, they stay in one place. Because right now, even if you're a new recruit into the police, for the first few years, they send you to your home state. After that, you are not part of the normal transfer policy. You know, you can be moved from Kano to Lagos. You know, so until we have that third category that now says you are employed for this purpose, because if we don't do that, what will happen is, let's imagine we have state police, and that only those two categories exist. What you will still be doing, move someone from one local government to another local government. So the same transfer problem still continues if we don't change it to say, with our officers now that we are employed for in this A local government, your entire career will be there. That, I think, is what now makes them to know the community very well and able to help secure that community.
So there is a problem with the transfer policy. I mean, that would be one of the downsides, so to speak, because I do know that, or I would imagine that, you know, when the transfer policy, you know, was brought up, it was so that policemen, Nigeria policemen could be Nigerian in every sense and have a very clear understanding of the country. But clearly, it is also a disadvantage of sorts. Well, I think it's some very interesting thinking. What do you think needs to happen now for ideas like this to move forward? Because I know that, well, it's a constitutional amendment. There will be a public hearing, so to speak. Do you think that ideas like this will be able to really sail through, or do you think that people are too, will I say, too fixed in their, because there you have proponents for state police, or those who say, no, we're against it. Are we seeing enough of movement around the middle ground to say, look, there can be a middle ground for those to address the fears of those who do not want it, and to address the concerns of those who say this is the way we need to go?
You see, I think, I think the challenge is that Nigeria, we are too much used to cut and paste. Clearly, when it comes to our nation, we need to be able to customize any policy. Yes, globally, you have centralized policing in some certain countries. Then you have a completely decentralized policing, like in the U.S. They have almost 19,000 police departments in the U.S. But when you bring it home, you have to go, what works for us? And this, I believe, is a Nigerian solution to a Nigerian problem, which is we have federal police, but in each state, the agenda they are running with is a state agenda. And I think that we balance this very well. In terms of whether the politicians are listening, it's a different thing, because some are supporting state policing purely for political reasons. I remember speaking to one deputy governor recently, and I broke this thing down, and he said, I don't think I want state police again, because suddenly it dawned on him the cost. For example, I was talking about state prison. State prison. They didn't factor that in, that they need to cater for that. And the other things, even within the criminal justice system, that state will need to invest in. I mean, Oxford research many years ago, about eight years ago, says only about 12% of crimes in Nigeria are reported to the police. Let's assume we have state police, and that goes up to, say, just 20% of crimes are reported. That's millions new crimes every year. That's millions of new prosecutions every year. State will have to hire more prosecutors, build more courts, hire more judges. The cost just, balloons. It's not just about state police and that's it. There are other costs that comes with it that many states are not yet factoring, and that's my challenge.
It's certainly food for thought, and I certainly know that this is an ongoing conversation. We have to thank you for sharing your thoughts with us.
Thank you.
Dr. Charles Omole is a lawyer and a security policy expert.